What's up, everyone? Welcome to the Unpopular Opinion. That is my overview, my look, my opinions on Final Fantasy XIII, XIII-2, and Lightning Returns Final Fantasy XIII, possibly the worst named Square Enix game besides Kingdom Hearts 2.8 Final Chapter Prologue. So I'm going to be comparing these games completely spoiler-filled. So there's going to be spoilers all over the place. I'm going to go over the story, which honestly, there's really only one big point to spoil, if you're worried about that. But anyway, I'm going to go in-depth everything. I'm going to talk a little bit about the endings and stuff, so you have been warned. So here we go. I broke this into combat, characters, story, with gameplay here and there, and then just other points that I wanted to talk about overall that decided how I feel about these games as a whole. I heard kind of horror stories about these games. I went and I picked up 13. I got into it. I was like, I don't really see the problem yet. So I grabbed 13-2 and Lightning Returns together. And I started my venture to complete them all. As many of you know, I had a lot of trouble getting through 13-3, but we'll talk about that. First point, combat. So the combat for 13 I thought was great. I think it's the strongest point of the game. I started with combat for a reason. I feel like that's what makes a good RPG, is having good combat. You're going to be doing combat a lot. You're going to be grinding, and it has to be fun. So the way the combat worked in 13, I really enjoyed. It had this auto combo system, this auto combat, if you will, that I actually enjoyed. I know a lot of people don't like it because they're like, it does all the work for you. And it's like, yeah, but that's work that you would do anyway, and it doesn't really matter. So for instance, Lightning, or whoever you're playing as, is pretty smart in that they'll use out all their moves kind of one by one, auto attack, and then they figure out which ones are the strongest, and then they just use those. And you can be more efficient than they are, but there's really no reason to. And that's what you do in any RPG. You use all your attacks, you figure out what they're weak to, and then you basically just use that attack except for special circumstances. This is kind of exactly the same way. It just does the work for you, and I'm fine with that personally. It's easier and it saves time, and I didn't understand the big deal. And then for boss battles, you definitely need to do everything manually, which I guess is a problem because you haven't been practicing it, but clearly many people were able to figure it out. So, but I really, really enjoy the combat. They broke it into roles, which I thought was a nice kind of callback. You have like the Sentinel, the Ravager, the Commando, I believe, and I really liked the idea of the staggering effect, where melee attacks would make it so that the stagger kind of goes down slower, and then magic attacks would make it raise really fast, but it would also go down really fast, so you need to vary your attacks to keep the stagger meter close, and then when the enemy was staggered, they take a whole bunch of damage. Enemies did a bunch of powerful attacks that you need to have the Sentinel on your team to be able to lure the attacks towards you, kind of like a tank. I really liked all that stuff. I thought it was really, really well done. I thoroughly enjoyed the combat. The part of the problem was that they forced you to use all the roles, and I imagine that was a deliberate gameplay choice. This is all in 13, by the way. Deliberate gameplay choice. They want you to play as all the roles and pick the one that you like the most, because later in the game it opens up and you're allowed to pick whatever role you want. But I'm fairly sure everybody just picked Lightning. How many of you out there did not pick Lightning? Let me know. I could see people picking Vanille maybe, but like, I don't think people really want to play the healer role or the Sentinel for sure. Nobody wants to play a Sentinel. That's real boring. Or the Saboteur, or, like, that's kind of boring. I feel like everybody would either do the magic role or the combat sword role. So I thought that was a little weird that they forced you to use all these characters and use all their different roles when it makes you kind of hate part of the game where you're doing a role that you don't like. As far as grinding goes, that's something I want to talk a little bit about in each game. The grinding for 13 I thought was average. It's how grinding works in most games. You kill the same enemies over and over and over. It was a little weird because this game is very linear. It is very hallway up until a certain point. And I'll talk a little more on that later. But it is very linear, so like you could go through a door and then not be able to go back to the area you were just in. So it made grinding feel kind of urgent. you'd go into an area and it'd be like a good grinding area, and you're like, well, I don't want to go through the next door because there might be a cutscene where I'm on a spaceship and then I'm in a different place. So there was lots of times where I would just grind until I could one-shot the enemies there, and then I'd go to the next section and I'd do the same thing, and I kept like almost inching forward. But the combat was so fun, I didn't mind it. So let's transition into 13.2's combat. The combat in this game was the same as the first game, except better. And here's why it's better. They fixed every problem I had with it. The problems were you were stuck doing all these rolls, and then you had to pick one. This allows you to play as Null, Sarah, whichever one you want. They both have different pros and cons. You can level them up and go into any path that you want if you so choose, or you can stay with their strengths. So you can do that, but the third party member is missing, and it became a Pokemon, for lack of a better term. It's a monster that you can hunt, and then when you kill that monster, there's a chance of it dropping the crystal to be in your party. I loved this system because not only did it vary the combat, it allowed you to do these cool quick time event things in the middle of combat that really helped. But it also made grinding a lot better. So instead of grinding feeling like you were just trying to level your character, you were also trying to get new monsters to fight with you. You were going to different areas, maybe getting a really good monster and then venturing a little further and fighting things a little bit higher than you should because you have this cool monster to fight with you. It also rewards you with, when you kill these monsters, you get stuff to power them up so you can make them super strong. And I found myself strengthening a whole bunch of the ones that I really liked and creating something that I felt like worked for me. And I didn't feel like I could do that at least as easily in 13. So I love that they had the new monster system. I absolutely loved that you got to play as one of the characters through the whole game. You didn't have to keep constantly switching. And then, of course, the Pokemon and the grinding and the roll switching, all that stuff, as well as the Crystallarium that let you branch out and do things differently if you wanted to. It gave you options. It opened up even more than 13, which people complained 13 was too locked in. Well, this gives you the locked in mode, or you can go crazy. It lets you go. Then we transition into Lightning Returns, which I'm just going to call 13.3 from now on. 13.3's combat, a lot of people really like it. I absolutely hated it. It reminded me of 10.2, which is another Final Fantasy that I did not enjoy. You have one party member, which is just really awkward to me. They got rid of the monster collecting thing. Grinding literally doesn't really matter anymore. Instead of grinding and getting experience, you don't even get stronger from grinding anymore. You just get new attacks, which, yes, that is making you stronger. But instead of grinding monsters, you're grinding new attacks. It just didn't work for me. And then you can like synthesize the attacks and such. It was kind of convoluted and seemed unnecessary. I would rather have done the reverse of what they did. As far as getting stronger, you had to do quests, and they were mostly fetch quests and things of this nature. It felt very much like an MMO with no other players that were active. You're doing these quests that just feel kind of boring, kind of stupid, and then you get rewarded by leveling up. And I really think you should get rewarded by getting the attacks, and you level up by fighting. That would have been better. It may have made the game too easy because you could just grind a few of the days and then go do all the quests, but if that's how you want to play, that's how you want to play. They added in this wardrobe system where, since you don't have party members, they make up for it by, you can switch your wardrobe between whichever ones you want. You can have an all magic set. You can have magic sentinel, like tank, and then a heavy commando set. But they also changed how the staggering system works so that it doesn't work the same. It's just kind of like you keep hitting them with their weakness, and eventually they get staggered, and then you can double stagger them and stuff. It was an unnecessary change that felt really weird in the third game of a trilogy. And the costumes made everything feel out of place. Lightning always looked really weird, and she's so serious because she has no emotion. And then she's standing there in like a chocobo outfit, and it's like, this doesn't work. This doesn't work. And then the other weird thing that I always thought was strange when any game does this is your items and stuff, you can't be revived by your party anymore. So when you get like killed, you can use your Phoenix down after that to heal you. And it's like, that doesn't make sense. You were just killed. So I don't know. I know it's a game and you have to suspend your disbelief, all that stuff. But like, this game just didn't do it for me. I didn't like the combat. If you like the combat, I know lots of people that do like this combat. They think it's the best part of the game, and that may be true. But the combat didn't do it for me, especially because I liked 13's a lot. I thought 13-2 almost perfected it. It made it much better, and then I got into 13-3's combat, and I was like, whoa, this is not what Kevin wants. So let's move on to the characters. This is a very important point for this game, and I like, in general, the characters for this game. 13 gave us some great, memorable characters. I think Snow is great, Lightning's great, Hope is fine, Zaz is fine. I liked Vanille. We got Fang. So these are some cool characters. It's a little overstuffed, but I feel like the way that they weave the plot made it work, and the fact that they made you at least spend some time with each of the characters, at least let you know what they're about, for better or for worse. They had clear motives. At least the main characters in this one did. They had clear motives. There was this, I'm going to talk about in the story, the way that they interact with each other and the way that their fates line up is very interesting. All that stuff was great, and the biggest thing is there was character growth between all of the main characters. They started somewhere, they ended somewhere that was better, basically. Moving on to 13-2, which I once again feel like this one has the best in this category. You have all those characters that you liked, but it's a little bit of a twist on them, but they still act like the character for the most part, unlike 13-3. But you also get to spend your whole game with Sarah and Noel. People really like Noel, don't like Sarah. People really like Sarah, don't like Noel. Some like both. I personally love Sarah's my favorite character out of all of them, and I like Noel. Noel is fine. So it really worked for me that I was able to play as Sarah the entire game, and I really felt like I got to know her. I feel like I got to make her decisions during the decision parts and stuff. It felt natural to me. I also really liked the new villain setup, Caius and Yul. I thought that they worked really well. Once again, they mirrored Sarah and Noel. They kind of mirrored Snow and Lightning, and I really enjoyed that. I thought it was a really strong villain who, once again, had great motives that we're going to talk about in the story that paired very well with our main character's motives, or should I say not so well, and that's why it works very well. We encounter like cameos, I guess you could say, but they're pretty long cameos from people like Snow. Hope had a pretty big reveal that he didn't suck anymore as a person. Like all these things, we saw that once again they grew a little bit from when we saw them last. I enjoyed all of that. And on top of that, we have less characters, which I feel like let us grow a little more. We saw Lightning do her badass thing, and now the mission's to save Lightning, which kind of sucked. But she got to do her badass thing in the beginning, and this is Sarah's story, which leads me to the first game was really about Vanille, to be fair. She was kind of the hero of the story. And the second one's definitely about Sarah. I don't understand why Lightning's on the cover of all these games, but anyway, we'll move past that. So 13-3. The characters in 13-3, huge disappointment to me. Lightning is front center, but she doesn't have a personality, and what's her name? Lumina has all the personality for the game, really, and that whole thing bothered me because I was like, she looks like your sister, and Lightning doesn't really address it. Towards the end of the game, she's finally like, I know you're not her. I'm like, okay, that wasn't satisfying. But Lumina was the only person with personality in this game. Hope was real dull and just felt like he was reading a script constantly. You go and you have similar cameos to 13-2 that I liked so much, except they were all mediocre. Snow was probably the closest to decent, but like there was just something about him. Soulless is the best way to put it. All the characters just feel like they had all of their personality sucked from them. And worse, it felt like all that growth that they had from 13 and 13-2 was just gone. All of it gone. And I know, like, yeah, they changed the timeline. They should still have some personality. Like, nobody wants to play as a brick wall with a flashy sword and hair. And also on top of that, like even just in the cutscenes in 13 and 13-2, the characters do awesome stuff in the cutscenes and they get super powerful by the end of those games and everything. And I feel like all of that's just drained in this. Like Lightning just runs and jumps around, but in the first game she was like running on walls, and why can't I do that? Why isn't there like cool traversal in 13-3? I don't know. Once again, Fang, Vanille, Zaz is awful. Like they're all just so. They tried to do a Majora's Mask thing, and I understand that it didn't really work. I also feel like they were missing like their summons and all their cool stuff. They were just missing all their cool stuff from the games earlier until at least like the end of the game. Moving on to the new characters for that game. Here's the list of the new characters that were interesting. And that's probably the biggest problem with this game. They're, at least in 13 and 13-2, say what you want about it, at least the characters at least give you something to care about, to even if you don't care, they give you something. In this game, you don't really get introduced to new characters, and you definitely don't get invested in any of the new characters, so what's the point? Like, I wish Lightning would have gotten a party together and made a crusade and tried to take down this god. And instead, she's like, oh, I'll go find your cat, or whatever the side quest is. And it's like, oh, yeah, your soul will be free when I eventually save the world. Like, it just didn't work. Yeah, the side characters, awful. Like, there was no new main characters, and then the side characters that already existed, or that existed in the world, were just either really quirky or had no personality. Like, there was no middle ground. So let's move on to the story, which I'm going to try to go over this as fast as possible because the story is probably the least interesting part of these three things, but that's okay. I enjoyed 13's story, so let's jump into that. And this is the reason I was talking about all the overlapping characters. So Snow and Lightning are looking for Sarah. Good. Basic story. Save the princess. Got it. Makes sense. But Snow, eventually, when they find her and she gets taken away, Snow decides to help Sarah. He wants to save her. He knows deep down that she's still alive. And Lightning takes the revenge path. And this is really how this game works, and I enjoyed it very much. All the characters kind of have the same motive, but they all tackle it a different way, and they learn to talk to each other and get to know each other and then choose the best path to do it. Very similar thing happens with Hope and Vanille. Hope and Vanille go to take down Snow, and they get split up. Vanille learns that Snow's not that bad and decides, maybe we should team with him, whereas Hope, after the split up, still tries to kill Snow. I really enjoyed that. Then Vanille is with Zaz, and you find out that Zaz is missing his son. Cool. Well, not really cool, but he's missing his son. Okay, that's interesting story. Thank you. And then you find out Vanille's sort of responsible for that. Oh, that, conflict. All these characters intertwine with each other, and that's the word I'm really going to use. All their threads intertwine over each other, and it creates drama and tension, and that's what you need for interesting characters in a story like that. Then the game opens up, you find out who the real villain is, and you all team together to go take it down. You self-sacrifice at the end. The ending to this game is phenomenal, and I really like 13's story. Bookend to bookend, it's good. I like it a lot. And I feel like most people would agree. 13 has a really good story. Then we move to 13-2. Now, this is where things get problematic because 13-2 is a time travel story, and that's really difficult to do, and I, once again, don't think they got it right. Most people don't. So the biggest problem is that they changed the ending of 13 that I just praised so much. I was like, oh, 13's ending's great. Yeah, well, now it's different. They totally changed the ending. They backtrack on a whole bunch of things. Not cool. I like what they did with the time travel stuff in the way that there's paradoxes. I really like the paradox endings and such. They're going to eliminate the paradoxes. I think that's cool. It's an excuse to add in characters like Snow as these anomalies, but that's fine. Like, that's okay. I'm okay with that because it's kind of cool to me, at least. I like that you have this hub world that has a world, and then you can go to that world in a different time period, and it looks totally different, or it will look slightly different, but it might be snowing in one, it might be, raining in another, everything might be destroyed in one. I thought that was so cool, and I just really like hub worlds in games, and 13 was criticized for being too linear, and this game opened the game up in a way where it was still kind of linear, but they gave you so many options to do it in kind of whatever order you wanted that it didn't feel linear at all. I never felt like the game was like, go here, go here, go here, go here. I always felt like I had freedom to do whatever I wanted. Whereas 13, it was that linear thing, and that bothers some people. Didn't bother me, but it bothers some people. So there's that. I liked, this is talking about those character webs again. Noel and Sarah. Sarah's trying to save Lightning. Noel also, but Noel likes Yule, and Caius also likes Yule, and Yule keeps dying because of what Noel and Sarah are doing. So Yule keeps dying, which is driving Caius insane. But Noel also likes Yule, so Caius and Yule are trying to stop what Sarah and them are doing because it's directly affecting all of them. And this is something that 13 did wrong, I feel like, is the final boss in 13 was fine, but then it got like out of hand, like most Final Fantasy bosses do. I don't feel like 13-2's got out of hand. I thought it was totally a fair idea for a boss fight. The villain stayed the same throughout. I think Caius was a great villain, and he was a kind of his own tragic hero, which is what makes a really good villain. When they have their own story, you feel like you could watch it from their perspective and go, yeah, that makes sense. Like, this person that he really likes keeps dying. That's probably a problem, and he'd probably want to stop that. You add in like the whole, he's kind of got a god demon heart thing, but whatever. I thought that was fine. I also really liked that the ending for this game was really neat, the new cocoon idea. They did change the first ending that I absolutely hated that they did that, but they went back and they kind of redid the ending again, and I thought that was really neat, and being able to save everybody in the process. I thought that was at least cool, and then, of course, the consequence for that, Sarah dying at the end due to the timeline change. Thought that was unfortunate, but justified. And then they do the worst thing of all, which is to be continued. They put that to be continued, and instantly the ending is mediocre. You cannot do that. You cannot set up a sequel like that, and it's unfortunate because it does have a recap of 13 in that game, and I would almost recommend people play 13 too, and that specific ending makes me not be able to recommend it, just because it's like, well, you'll get to the end, and then this game's coming. And here's I don't even know the story of this one. It's 500 years later. Lightning awakes from her sleep, but she still remembers the non-existent Sarah. So she basically has this deal with God that she's going to save all these souls. And she has a certain number of days to do it. She goes out, she's doing quests, she's saving souls. She finds out that he's actually just going to basically wipe the slate clean, make a new world. I argue, how many times has he done this? Do we know anything about this? Not really. We don't get the villain perspective in this game. We really don't, and that's what makes it worse than 13, which we do get it, a little bit at least, and 13-2, which we get it a lot. This one, we don't really know the villain's intentions. The story felt really rushed. The game looks worse, honestly, than all the other ones. It runs worse. I do like the different areas. I like how different they are. They're all treating this end of the world problem that they all know is coming very differently. Some are throwing parties. Some are very like mourning and hate that this is happening. I like the different dynamic of the different areas. They sort of have that hub world thing with the train, but it's not as good as 13-2's. And then my biggest problem with the story with this is it just the ending kind of felt like, I just didn't believe it. I didn't buy it. I don't see Lightning taking down an actual god. That just seems ridiculous to me, especially when he demonstrates all these powers and then the final fight is just kind of hitting him with stuff. And he doesn't do anything godlike, really. Like, he's got powerful attacks, but he's not like... I don't know. I just feel like he would be able to do way cooler things because of all the stuff we've seen him do already. But anyway... and you could say, well, you're not getting the complete story. You're confused. Yeah, I am confused. I completely admit that. I don't get the story. That's the best I got. Didn't like it. I thought the ending was interesting when it turns out Lightning was wrong and she kind of just damned the world. And I thought that I was like, now that's a cool ending. Lightning kind of turns out to be the villain, which is kind of how I thought of her this whole time. not knowing God's plan. I was like, maybe he does this all the time and she just doesn't know, almost like a Matrix-y thing. But that didn't happen. They totally flipped that ending right away. And I was like, that kind of sucks. So let's go to kind of my wrap up. These are just other points I wanted to point out about the game. So 13.3, I want to talk about the boss fights. Now, I specifically brought up that I thought the attacks and stuff of the final boss were stupid in 13.3. I actually still think it was the best boss fight. And the reason is it didn't feel unfair. 13 felt incredibly unfair to me. The instant deaths and stuff was just too much. 13.2 also had that, but it was a little more justified. I liked 13.2's, but I thought I liked that 13.3's final fight was a fight completely straight through. There was different phases, but you had to be prepared for all of them. You don't get a break in between them. And I thought that was just cool for a Final Fantasy game because you don't see that very often. I want to talk a little bit about 13.2 and like its side content. I liked 13.3 side content opens up halfway through the game. 13.2's it's like sporadic, and I enjoyed that. You get the casino, which is a really fun time to, just spend your time, earn some extra money, get some trophies. I think the music is the best in 13.2, though I've noticed online a lot of people disagree with that. I think 13.3, once again, has the weakest music, and I think it's like the weakest by far, but I have seen lots of people saying 13.3 has the best music. So once again, unpopular opinion. I don't know what the popular opinion for this is. I imagine it's 13, 13.2, 13.3, but I'm not entirely sure because everywhere I Google it, it's just craziness. I feel like 13.2 did an open world better than 13.3. I talked about how it had the hub worlds and you can go explore those and then you can switch the time periods and it was the same but different, and that was okay. 13.3's world didn't really feel alive because everybody's soul and personality was so drained or so over the top. It just didn't feel like that would function as an actual place. So let's just go into the 13.3 list. Here we go. I put a bunch of stuff here that I just want to talk about. I had to force myself to finish 13.3. That's never a good sign for a game because I didn't like the combat, which is such a focus in the game. Obviously, you can't progress without combat. I had to force myself to finish it. I didn't have to force myself to finish 13. I loved 13.2 and got through it way faster than I planned. 13.3, I was like, oh my gosh. I don't like doing the side quests. They force you to do the side quests. You couldn't just grind. I thought that was awful. You're actually timed everything you do in 13.3, so that to me created a bunch of stress. It made me feel like I wasn't being efficient with my time. Every time I played, I would like pause it and then shut it off and just do it again because I didn't feel like I used my time correctly. And that's not a good way to play a game. Like my efficiency didn't work. And then the biggest thing about it is I feel like there's relatable characters in 13. They're spread out between all the characters, like personalities and stuff, but you can relate a little bit to each one. 13.2 same way, except there's less characters, and you get a little more in each. 13.3, I don't know who I'm supposed to relate with. You don't relate with Hope, who's just talking to you through an intercom the whole game. You don't relate to Blank Slate Lightning, who lost all of her personality and doesn't talk. I guess you relate a little to Lumina. I don't understand who you're supposed to care about in that game, and that's what it comes down to. So, with all those points said, I enjoyed 13 quite a bit. I enjoyed 13.2 a lot, and then 13.3, I beat it because it was a trilogy. That was really all it came down to. So my final ranking is 13.2, 13, 13.3, firmly far down. I think 13 and 13.2 are both good games. I think they get a very bad rep. And if you like 13.3, it makes sense to me. I don't like time management. The game has a lot of time management. I don't like the combat. The game forces you to do the combat, obviously. I don't like side quests. The game is literally just side quests. So it makes sense that I don't like that game. And I could understand why people would like that game. I want to end this by going over their Metacritics because a lot of people always trash talk these games. Their Metacritics are good. Final Fantasy 13 has an 83. It gets very good 8s and 9s reviews. That makes sense. 13.2 got a little bit lower reviews. It got a 79. I'm sure people were mad that it was more of the same that didn't like 13. and the retroactive 13's great, and then like later everybody's like 13's okay. It's pretty linear. I feel like that really hurt 13.2 just because 13 was a perfect package and 13.2 wasn't. And then 13.3 has a 66, which is a mixed review score, which once again, I just said, I understand that. So I'd recommend checking out 13 probably and seeing if you like it. If you enjoy that, I would move forward with the series. If you didn't, you're probably not going to like 13.2 and you won't understand 13.3, so it won't be worth it. But anyway, thank you for spending this time with me to listen to me ramble about this unpopular opinion. I've been wanting to do this all year ever since I started 13, and I finally got it done, so I'm quite happy. And I'm actually going to jump back into 13.2 and play it more later tonight, so that's how much of an impact that game left. But thank you so much for watching this video. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe, and I'll speak with you guys next time.